The internet is full of language learning advice, and sometimes it's just plain terrible. Hello Visilinguals, and welcome back to my channel. Now before we get into today's topic, if you are new to my channel, then a warm welcome, herzlichen willkommen, and if you are not yet subscribed to my channel, go and click that subscribe button now, and don't forget to hit the bell button to never miss out on anything from the Busy Linguist. I'm sure that you have read dozens and dozens of forums, you've seen articles about this. Every single app talks about it, every single language learner, language teacher, language school, language talks about this. And it's to do with, the top tips on language learning, the top mistakes people make. I even have videos on these topics which you'll find here above. But anyway, I'm not here to make fun of myself. I'm here to help you guys with your learning. So today we're going to talk about the 5 worst pieces of language learning advice. Because as we know, there is a ton of advice out there. And whilst some is, kind of dependent on the person that you're talking about, on one's personality. And speaking of personalities, I've got a really interesting video coming up on that. But anyway, I'm getting off track. So on the other hand, we also have advice that just never works, and sometimes I question, why does this even exist? And as a language teacher and avid language learner myself, I'm always frustrated when I hear people like passing this advice on, or I see it written somewhere, or I see it in someone's video. So I'm here to help you guys save time, save your money, save your frustrations, and we're going to get into the first stupid piece of advice. You want to learn Swedish? You want to learn Ukrainian? Why on earth would you ever want to learn like Hungarian? The F is Esperanto. This is unfortunately a piece of advice that I think comes from a lot of people who don't understand why people learn languages. And it's the stupidest question really to ask someone, why don't you go and learn a language that makes more sense? Why didn't you choose an easy language? Why didn't you choose a useful language? Guys, the utility of a language and the use of a language is dependent on who is learning it. For me, learning Russian is a little bit easier, or let's say if I were to go and learn Serbian or Croatian, to me, it seems like an easy language because there are so many similarities to Russian words, and Latvian has the same amount of cases as Latvian, has the same letters as Latvian. So for me, it seems like an easy language. But to someone who comes from, let's say, the US and only speaks English, or to a Hispanic speaker, or, someone who speaks Mandarin or Japanese, they're going to look at Croatian and be like, this language seems like the worst thing in the world and the most difficult thing in the world. So it really is dependent, on the person, what your native language is. And then we come to the second thing, and it's interest, personal interest. Now, if you go and take all of the world's polyglots, and people who have successfully learned, multiple languages, and you ask them, how can you speak this language so well? How did you learn it? Why did you learn it? You will find that there is one common denominator, and it's passion. It's the fact that this person felt connected to the culture that is behind the language. And it's exactly the same for me, and I think this is something that you need to ask yourself as well. If you have chosen to learn a language just because you think it's going to get you a job, or it's, it's spoken by more people, unless your goal is to speak to the most amount of people in the world, I think a better question to ask yourself is, what am I passionate about? Am I actually passionate about this language? Am I actually passionate about the culture? Do I want to learn it because, my partner is from that country, or I really want to live in this country, or I just love the music, or I just love the literature, whatever it may be? That's the reason that you should go and learn a language. And this question of, easy, like which one's going to be the easiest, you're never going to succeed, guys. I'm telling you now, save yourself the struggle, save yourself the time, you're never going to succeed. Now, a common question that every single language learner asks themselves is, what should I start with? And there is a ton of information once again on this topic saying, you should start with grammar, you should start with the top list of words, you should start with listening, you should start with reading, you should start with whatever. The thing that you shouldn't start with is learning grammar. A, it's going to bore you. B, it's not going to be very useful because you won't be able to apply it to anything. So imagine, let's just say I was going to teach you Latvian. And the first thing I ever gave you was just a list of Latvian verb conjugations. You would have no idea what to do with them because A, you don't even know what this verb means that I've given you the conjugation for. You don't even know any, you don't even know how to say hello yet. You don't even know how to say my name is. Yet I'm already giving you, you know, the past perfect tense of it or whatever. Like grammar. You should not learn grammar first. Now, if you take a look at my book collection of language books, I have no grammar books whatsoever. I do have some books that incorporate exercises and that they do have some grammar activities in there, but they are supplementary to everything else that I do. And when I start learning grammar personally, this is something I've done for Portuguese, and you can also follow my progress throughout my YouTube channel, but I actually learn grammar when I find the necessity. So it's kind of, I use it as a gap filling exercise. And what I mean by this is, for example, recently I've started to really use a lot more of the subjunctive. So saying things like, I wish we could do that, and it would be better if we had that, and I had no idea how to form it. Relying on my little Spanish conjugations didn't help me out either. And so what I started to do is then I looked at, you know, the subjunctive for the most common verbs. But I didn't go and look at that straight away, and that's the point. Learning grammar without having any input beforehand is super silly, and I think, you know, I'm not disregarding the learning of grammar at all, because, you know, I studied the languages that I speak at university as well and at high school, and of course the grammar helped me to really refine my language skills, but especially because we want to speak a language. Starting with grammar is not gonna get you anywhere. What to start with when learning a language? Apparently I should start speaking from day one. So guys, speaking from day one, just as much as learning grammar from day one, is silly advice. Now, so that there are no misunderstandings, the timeline or the sequence in which you do certain events can be as short as a couple of minutes. So what I mean by this is the moment that you have listened to, say, some audio of someone saying hello, how are you, or someone teaching you how to say hello, how are you in a language, you repeating it and then saying it back. So that timeline of events is really, really short. But as you can see, the first thing wasn't just random coming up with things, guessing in something in the language. It comes from input, from hearing. So my advice here is the number one thing to start with is a lot of input, a lot of listening, and then you come to mimicking. So I do suggest to start speaking as early as you can, but having the necessary input and having a lot of it is what's going to help you, especially when it gets to conversations, because without you realizing it, you're going to have this like backed up database of things to say in the situations that you've already listened to previously. The next piece of advice you should never ever follow is that quantity overrides quality. Now this goes for many things in life, in relationships, in fitness, in, you know, whatever you do. Quantity in language learning doesn't necessarily define how successful you're going to be. You know, you always see these, you need to study for 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours to reach a level. But the question that I ask those people is, well, how are you actually spending those hours? You know, it has to be quality that goes into your learning. So what I mean by this is that you are alert, that you are doing the most effective, I guess, exercises for what you need to do. So accompanying your speaking practice with some grammar, with some input, and actually being really alert when you're learning. So sitting there for 5 hours is not going to be very effective because the human brain simply cannot concentrate for that long. And we always have this mechanism going on in our brains where our want to be productive is always being outweighed by our sleepiness. So for example, you know, the more active you are or the more kind of productive or working you are, then like this bar of you getting tired rises. So you can check this out as well in a book that I read a couple of months ago called Brain Rules, where they talk about this whole concept of, you know, when we are most effective in learning and why you have this concept of like night owls and early birds. So that's something to also consider. So for me, for example, I don't actually spend that much time. Actually, I don't spend any time at the moment like in books in Portuguese because that's not my goal. And what I find to be most effective is asking questions. I learn the best through interaction. So for me, that's what makes the most sense, not writing sentences, because the minute that I would sit myself down and like, the number of times I've actually done this, where I've sat myself down, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna write this this nice little paragraph in Portuguese, it bores me. But when I see the utility, for example, messaging back my friends in Portuguese, then that's where I learn, because it's that interaction that is really effective for me. You want to start learning a new language? Hold on. Here you go, the top 100 most used words in a language. Thanks. Guys, I tried this once and never again. These lists of most useful words, to me, is the stupidest thing that I have ever encountered. I mean, yes, of course, I mean, we all know we're gonna say and we're gonna say I, and we're gonna say he, and we're gonna say she. But you know, in this list of top 100 words, if I have the word for clothes, me, sister, window, light, door, it's really not gonna get me anywhere. So my suggestion there is really learn with phrases. I cannot stress this enough. We speak a language in phrases, in dialogues, so therefore it would make sense to go and learn it that way as well. And if you're really inclined, you know, to have a look at some of these top 100 word list things, then my suggestion would be, for every single word, you know, have the list on the left hand side, and for every single word, write out a sentence with that word in it. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and found the terrible advice useful. Well, I hope that you do not make those mistakes or do not take this advice, and check out some of my other videos to get some good language learning tips that are gonna make your progress soar. And if you want exclusive content, exclusive language learning advice, then sign up to my email list, and also check out my language learning ebook, where I show you all the methods, all the techniques that I personally used to learn 8 languages. And other than that, like this video if you enjoyed it, and I will see you guys in my next video. Ciao, hasta luego, a la prochaine.